This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon. In recent years, we've come to see the benefit of knowing where your food comes from. We see the value of buying local, buying from our neighbors. So when I say make news local again, it's that same buy local instinct that I'm putting into words. Simply put, I trust the work of my neighbors more than I do that of people in Lansing, Washington, or New York trying to tell me what to think. At the Enjoyer Podcast, one of our goals is to make news local again. When we write about Traverse City or Ann Arbor or Detroit, we talk about them as places people live. We look for guides to light our path. My guest today is Dave Bondy. He's one of the best guides we have in Michigan. If you know me, you know Dave. Dave is probably the most followed journalist on social media in Michigan across his many channels. After a quarter century in TV news, Dave went independent. Today, he hosts an online show on locals called Keeping It Real. Dave uses his channel to tell the stories that others ignore. He talks to people, not at them. Dave Bondy is a friend and a colleague, and it's my pleasure to have him on. Dave, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much for being here, and I credit you for helping me on my journey as well. You've been instrumental. I've learned a lot from you as well, and
Me?
yeah, I really appreciate it. And the media landscape is really changing, and a lot of disappointment, but there are some positives. I look forward to going over all of it because the average person, they probably don't know what's going on.
No, they don't. And so when people like yourself and myself can talk about it together, we got what, 40, almost 45 years of experience in journalism between the two. We can help the average person at home see the techniques that make stories slanted, see how their consent is being manufactured.
Yeah.
But Dave, I'll start you with an easy one. What do you enjoy about Michigan?
It's where I grew up. I grew up in Metro Detroit. We have the seasons. My friends and family are here. That's the main reason why I came back. I was working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at a dominant NBC television station, making good money, a top 25 market, and I would have never come back here if it wasn't for family. My mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I wanted to be here. I wanted to help. If it wasn't for the family, there is no way I probably would have come back to Michigan. But I love it because they're the people. We do have good people, and there's a lot of misconceptions across the country. When I told people I was going to work in Flint, Michigan, they thought I was nuts. They thought there's stereotypes everywhere, but Michigan is really a good place. It really is.
Absolutely. And I'd like to ask you a tale of two journeys. Perhaps they're the same journey, perhaps they're a little bit different. Tell me about your Michigan journey and your way back to Michigan, and when was this? What were you thinking when you decided to come back, and not even to come back to Detroit, which, a lot of people might do, but to a non-Detroit market within Michigan? And then also, if you could talk about your journalism journey, and to the extent those are different stories, please tell both.
Exactly. My goal, even when I knew what I wanted to be when I was 7 years old. I was watching Detroit local news, Bill Bonds, as you remember, Bill Bonds, he was
Absolutely.
a legend. And back then that was
The Anchorman.
the Anchorman. I wanted to be a reporter. I would go around the neighborhood with a little fake microphone and interview people. So I knew what I wanted to be. And I'll start out the career, graduated from Eastern Michigan University, which was not a journalism school.
No.
But while I was in my last year of high school and college, I was working at the Detroit Free Press in their sports department, writing the little paragraphs on the high school football games.
Oh, yeah.
I just got my foot in the door there. And for some reason, I turned into broadcast television. So I graduated, went to Evansville, Indiana at a TV station, making $18,000 a year. Then Wilmington, North Carolina, Saginaw, Michigan.
What years are we talking about?
Yeah, let me go back. 1998, graduated Eastern.
98.
98.
18,000 in 1998?
1998.
That wasn't that long ago.
Not really. So the misconception, everyone who works in TV is not rich, and I'll get into that. That's absolutely true. But I was dedicated, I was motivated, and I went into a little trouble going into debt making, but it's what I wanted to do. So I did that for 2 years, went to Wilmington, North Carolina, making $22,000 a year. Yay. Loved it there, by the way, but couldn't afford it. Moved back to Michigan, Saginaw, Michigan, at WNEM. Met my wife and met her, and my goal was to be in Detroit, always to be in Detroit because I grew up as well. I believe Metro Detroit. The goal was to be at Channel 7 where Bill Bonds was.
Absolutely. You wanted Bill Bonds' actual seat.
Either or, I loved reporting. Actually, I loved being in the streets. I loved the reporting of it. I wasn't a big fan of being an anchor. I wanted to be a reporter.
So you want Charlie Langton's job?
Yes, or the perfect one would be like LaDuff when he was with Fox 2.
Oh, that was
I love the style. I love
yes.
chasing people down the street. I love just uncovering information. But it didn't work out. I had several opportunities that didn't work out. So I went to move to Birmingham, Alabama with my wife, a Fox station there on a market 40. I loved it. And then got a call to go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, NBC, top 25 market, making very good money. Loved the station there for 6 years and bought a house, plan on staying. And my mom was
Bought a
diagnosed.
house.
Bought a house. Yeah. I was
Like
there.
that was going to be home.
I was going to be home, and I was turning into I was always a Lions fan, but the Steelers had a winning team at the time. So,
Right.
no, I loved it there, and there were actually very good journalists at the time that I was there. I spent a whole summer in covering the Jerry Sandusky trial, so I did a lot of things. Mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I was getting older. I had our first daughter. And I realized, family is really important, extremely the most important thing. And I know you have been through this journey as well. So I saw a job opening in Flint, Michigan, which is a market 75. It's not a big market.
Wow,
For
75.
main anchor. And I applied and I told my wife, I said, there's no way they can hire me. They can't afford me. And it worked out. And they hired me. And at the same time, I had an offer to go to Detroit, WDIV, and it was like a freelance. And for those who don't know what freelance is, basically, there's no insurance, no benefits. You're working day to day and no contract. They could get rid of you at any time. And
It's like a stringer.
same thing, yeah, and same thing. And they do a lot of that in television. Basically, they'll call you in, and if they don't want you anymore, you're just gone. And that's to save money. They're doing
That
that.
feels like a very non-tenure track position.
It's
Like how many people go from stringer to, actually getting hired on and becoming a reporter?
There in Detroit, many do, and they do it, I think, as a way to test who you are, so they don't have to lock you into a 3-year contract. But
Right.
I have a friend in Chicago at the NBC who has taken that route. It's been 8 years, and she is still a stringer, a freelancer. So yeah, but I loved it in Flint. I was full-time main anchor on television on the Fox and NBC affiliate. Therefore, started in 2015, and I left in 2023, and here I am. I'm doing my own independent thing. My wife and I are managing some social media, and also I'm doing work for the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, and I put that out there. Got a lot of different things going on, but I'm happier as I've ever been.
Do you ever think about that alternate scenario in life? Like I've heard it said that it's better to be hanged in England than to die of a heart attack in Ireland. Have you ever thought about what if the Detroit path had worked out?
Yeah, and I've had several. Like I was offered and turned down an interview at KNBC in Los Angeles at one point, and
Really?
that was before I even got married. So there's a lot of things that could have changed
Different paths that could have been taken.
life, and a lot of young people and a lot of people in television. The goal is to get to New York or LA.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that somewhere along the line, like my goal was Detroit, but other things came in the mix, and I do believe things happen for a reason, and life would have been different, but God chose this path, and it's amazing.
Media criticism is a big part of what we do at the Enjoyer. As I look across Michigan, and not just Lansing, Detroit market, suburbs, everything. As I look across the landscape, I see a media with little curiosity. I see reporters explaining what they should be questioning, like lockdowns or nursing home deaths.
Yes.
I see a Lansing media that portrays our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, more favorably than her own press office would dare to. I see a media that's so scared to do anything that would be perceived as helping Donald Trump that it's scared to tell true stories anymore.
Yeah.
What do you see?
I see the same thing, and that's one reason why I walked away. It's very disappointing. It is not the same that when I started in 1998, I was encouraged to question authority, to go after officials, to dig through documents, to question everything. My, journalism professors I had told me that. My first boss I had in television that said that was my job. I would run after people at city council meetings and or go to mayor's offices who avoided me. That's what I love doing. But over the last 8 to 9 years that I've seen it, it's really fallen off to the point where at my last station, I was almost disciplined for having a critical eye and look at things and for questioning officials. It's turned the opposite way, and it's frightening. And I remember, and I'm fair. I will go after Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I got really tough with Governor Rick Snyder in a news conference about the Flint water crisis, and I was respectable, but I was near the line of being a little disrespectful. But I was fair to him, and I asked him a question. I came back, and my boss said, "You can't do that. We may have to suspend you, or you're going to be in trouble for this." And I'm like, "Why?" And the same with Governor Whitmer. I was respectful for her, but asking tough questions was a no-no. It's really changed, and it's disappointing. And we can get into this a little bit, but it's like you said, it's more media, public relations firms, but a lot of it has to do with the staffing too. Where I worked at NBC 25 and Fox 66, when I got there in 2015, we probably had 70 employees. Now they're probably down to 15.
And so that scarcity, I think, is also part of the strategy, right? So if there's no one really around, then everyone has to do what they're told, and there's no time to question anything or to challenge anything. You just have to do it. You just have to do it. And I think that's kind of a created dynamic.
You just have to do it. And the governor's office, any governor, Republican, Democrat, would know this. And I've seen it firsthand, not just where I worked, but at other media. They will literally take press releases from said official and post them on the web as is. And I've seen that, and that's completely wrong. And a lot of younger people coming out of journalism school or whatever, they don't know the difference. And I asked someone, why did you do this? Like, well, we don't have any time. We just got to get it out there. And there's literally no time to dig through budgets or documents. My former station had a FOIA budget of like $1,000 a year, which is filing a Freedom of Information request. And as you know, $1,000 doesn't get much. I know Detroit News, I think, spent 20-30,000 FOIAing just the water crisis. In literally my old station when I was there, and there might be now 2 reporters. The Flint market is not just Flint. It's Flint, Saginaw, Bay City. There's 850,000 people in our market. You can't cover that with 2 people. You
2
can't.
people.
Yeah,
so what ends up
you can't.
happening is those people end up reading what they're given to read, or maybe they're even allowed to write it themselves. Maybe they have to because of staffing, but it's not reporting.
It's not reporting. And to make up for that, and I did a tweet on this the other day, and a lot of people I worked with may not like it, but to supplement the content, because there's still the same hours of news, there's something called like CNN News Source. So CNN you see them on television, but they also they have a behind the scenes subdivision of CNN. They provide content to all of the local stations. So every day they would send stories out to all of the stations for the local anchor or reporter to do their voiceover, but the story is already written. So CNN will provide the content, and it happens at all the Detroit stations, maybe not Fox 2, I think, but 4 and 7. Almost every station, they provide content. And my company I work for, I call them the mothership. They had 80 stations. They provide all the content in DC and hand it on down to us. But it's not local, and that's the problem. And then with CNN, you have a bias as well. So it's not local content, and that's why people watch local news.
And I think that's a big part of the problem in the make news local movement. So I come from the print world, and I see the exact same problem where you go to open your local newspaper thinking you're going to get just that, a local newspaper. You think you're going to get true, timely stories about people in your community. And what you end up getting is a paper that in many cases is larded up 40-50% of the stories nation and world. coming from outside of your community. Often they're running the way they come in, and so there's no critical thought that's put into it, and there's no like and this and for this to happen on TV, I see that as well. I was watching the local TV news once, waiting for a show to come on. Why am I seeing stories about Georgia? And I'm not talking about the school shooting. I'm talking about porch pirates. I'm talking about corruption. There's nothing in Georgia that should ever migrate its way up here besides maybe a school shooting.
They don't have enough local. Detroit's better. I'm in a smaller. It's even worse in a city like a Flint or a Lansing. There are many great journalists in TV news, and I worked, and then there's still many amazing journalists out there. I don't like stereotyping. I know many of them who are very frustrated. Um, they're just not there. So literally, they can't even drive out to. That's why you see a lot of
Right.
Zoom interviews now on
Right.
television. Back in the day, you would drive out to the stories and you would go to the police. I remember as a kid, not a kid, but 23, 24 years old, going to the police station every day, thumbing through all the police reports, looking for, and now that just doesn't happen. There are some people, Detroit News, Free Press, great journalists who do it. So I don't want
Well,
people
these
to think
days you
there's
might not
not,
even
but there
have
are.
access to the blotter. Or in a place
Oh,
like
you don't.
Detroit, they don't
And
keep a blotter anymore, so you can't page through it.
no, Michigan's one of the absolute worst when it comes to transparency. It's
As someone
horrible.
who's been elsewhere, I'm 40. I've lived a summer and a year somewhere else in the DC area. So mostly a Michigan guy. You've seen it.
Yeah.
You've seen life on both ends of that red dirt road. Why is Michigan the worst?
When I was younger, I always thought everyone said, Alabama and place like that, they're going to be very not transparent. But when I started working in the business, I was shocked when I left Michigan, and things were better in Michigan. When I was younger, I could go to the Saginaw, the Bay City Police Department, and thumb through and look through the reports. And like you said, that has stopped now. They want you to file a Freedom of Information Act. But in Alabama, in Pennsylvania, it was amazing. I could easily get 911 tapes,
Really?
police reports, court records. I could get, as they call them, perp walks of suspects.
Detroit pretty much
It's
doesn't
just
do the perp
amazing.
walk.
No, I don't see it very much
The
at all
closest
in
thing I think we
Michigan.
have to a perp walk is if someone's going into the federal court and the media catches them on the
Yeah.
way, but it's not facilitated like it is in other places. No one makes it easy for you here.
No, and maybe I can ask you why that is. There's a lack of trust in the media, but like, for example, Flint, Michigan, and many people know, and you've been in newsrooms, they have the police scanners where we get to hear what's going on in the community. Genesee County, Michigan spent millions of dollars to block police scanner traffic from going over the airwaves. So you cannot hear scanner traffic in Flint, Michigan or Genesee County. They spent millions of dollars on encryption software, and they would not even give the newsrooms and unencrypt it to hear the activity. So we never knew. There would be weeks, and we would say someone was murdered, and we had no clue. So I don't know. What do you think? Why is Michigan so closed off? It for new journalists coming to this state, they're like, "What is going
It
on?"
is a strange place. Those documents you talked about, 911 calls. A lot of people will ask you
Yeah.
to file a FOIA to see what the weather is that day. Um, Truth is an endangered species here. I don't,
Yeah.
like when George Hunter would get police reports from Detroit Police Department, it was like a Harry Houdini act. It was not the typical. It's not something you could get just by asking. So I think a place like Alabama, my guess is at one point was kind of like we are, but maybe took on a national
Mm.
reputation for it. During the civil rights movement, a lot of outsiders come in, and that that
Yeah.
that casts a shadow on your community and maybe make something that you feel the need to clean up for. Whereas I think that
Yeah.
sometimes here we're maybe so complacent, everyone thinks things are fine.
Yeah.
And so, like that Supreme Court Secret Service director Kim Cheadle,
Yeah.
when I saw that she was from Michigan, I was horrified. I was like, how could you have any woman who started her career in Detroit in law enforcement in charge of protecting our president? And every
Yeah.
answer I've seen that Michigan shrug a million times. What's the budget? How many homicides have you had this year? I don't know. Yeah,
Oh, good luck. Good luck getting that. I mean, the Flint, Michigan Police Department, they don't even provide some years statistic to the FBI, and that's a whole other
I mean, that
issue. Yeah,
encryption thing,
that's
that is inherently a scandal itself. How does Flint have millions
well,
to
they can
spend
they
on
can
anything but helping the people of
they can say
Flint?
it's public exactly. They can say it's public safety, and I get that point. If there's a standoff going on in a neighborhood and a bad guy's in a home, you don't want that guy to have a scanner maybe to be hearing what's going on. But it's to the point where the public they don't know and we don't know. Flint Police Department, they would never answer their phones. We weren't hearing anything on the scanner. And if you were the average person, you would think that crime is non-existent.
Because crime is non-reported. And so if you
Yes.
know as the victim of a crime that nothing's going to happen, the police won't even show up, no one will even take a report. I mean, it would be a rigmarole in a lot of cases to even get a report filed in some of these cities. That's the quality of our justice. And it's stunning to me. Like I think about um ahead of the NFL draft, Detroit puts up that big sign, the Detroit sign on the freeway. We could talk about the size of the sign if it was big time enough, but what I found troubling about the whole thing is that no one ever woke up and thought they did that for us. No, they didn't do it for you. They did it for outsiders. They did it for visitors. We don't get nice things. We don't deserve nice things.
And there were a few, yourself, others, journalists that questioned that, but a lot of the coverage when it first went up, that sign, hey, yay, and they're cheerleading, and we're just not holding officials in Michigan accountable. And like for example, the Whitmer administration, they know it. They know that, for example, that if you don't play ball as a media organization, her office will cut you off with all interviews. She does year-end interviews with all of the media. And if you do not play nice during the year, you lose access to her. And unfortunately, and this isn't just Governor Whitmer, it happens across the country, I'm sure. And cities. I've had like mayors cut us off, my former station. So it's the access, and the stations do not want to lose that access.
And I think they overvalue what the access means. And they and this is the problem with the degrading quality of journalism and the degrading levels of experience of people doing it. A good journalist might say, I'm going to make you so afraid of avoiding me that you'll have to do an interview. I'm going to hit you in so many ways that to shut me up, you're going to sit down. You'd rather me be in the same room with you for 20 minutes because at least you know where I am at that point. Where's the fangs?
It doesn't exist. I mean, I did a story that my station, I give them credit. They allowed me to go after the state of Michigan about during COVID with comorbidities, and Michigan still to this day does not report if someone died of COVID. Did they have leukemia? Were they obese? And other states were doing it, and I did the story. My station allowed me to do it, but the station took a lot of heat from the governor's office, from the Department of Health, and they kind of backed off after that, doing stories like that. And that's not the journalism I remember from back in the day. That's it's and you're self-censoring as a journalist, as a reporter. If you're in that environment long enough, oh, I'm just not going to pitch that story because I know it's not going to be allowed.
You know where the Overton window is. I was at a conference to start the year with this guy. He covers the White House, the Biden White House. And he was, kind of at lunch talking about the things that get you frozen out, asking about age, asking about his family, that kind of thing. And so if you have that list in your head that you can quote, you're not going to ask those questions. It's like an invisible fence around your journalism. You already have parameters. So when Mike Bouchard, the sheriff of Oakland County, after the splash pad, I got on his case because he was telling the journalists to not reach out to the victim families. I think that they're all big boys and girls. They can say no on their own. That's the ham-handed way to do prior restraint. That's not how you do it. That's not how you do it. How you do prior restraint is you make them not want to do the interviews by offering them something else, the carrot and the stick.
Yeah, it's disappointing, and especially during COVID and the lockdowns and so forth. That's what really, I think, convinced me that I need to move in another direction. There were so many stories that, well, A, they weren't allowed, but then B, I knew if I suggested them, they wouldn't be. It was really disappointing. And I think now we're learning. We're learning that a lot of the things should have been told. And the 6 foot rule was completely made up out of nowhere.
And we all acted like it was true because no one asked or was allowed to ask, hey, Governor, where'd we get that from? Oh, Fauci. Hey, Governor, where'd he get it from? Can anyone tell me the origin of this idea? Can anyone tell me where came the idea that all 10 million people of Michigan, minus the people who are too essential and poor, truck drivers, you guys got to keep showing up to work. Cops, you got to keep showing up to work, but I can stay home.
Yeah, and it's sad. I remember during the news conferences with Governor Whitmer, she would hand pick which reporters would be on her Zoom news conferences. And even later in the pandemic, she continued Zoom news conferences, which I thought was ridiculous, really. I mean, she literally handpicked. And at some point, I think you had to supply questions as to what your questions would be. And that's just not the case. I interviewed Trump twice. I didn't give them questions. I never would I would tell people, "Hey, I want to interview you about Flint water," but I would never ever give questions to anybody I would interview.
Because that's not how you supply information to your audience. Why are so many of our colleagues, I mean, from what I can see, no one gets anything worthwhile from this access? What's the last year-end interview you saw that broke news that was important in any way? Or in the eyes of TV news is the thought, we just need to be able to show her face.
Show her face, and because our competition has her on, we have to have her on as well. And then there is that self-censorship even among management and the reporters. You don't want to piss her off or piss whatever governor off because, you know, but I do give certain people credit. Governor Snyder was amazing because he took it. He took the tough questions. I watched DeSantis down in Florida. It doesn't seem like he backs down from reporters, but it's disappointing. And the public, they're suffering, but they also, I think, they're catching on. The ratings are going almost non-existent. My former station, when I started, I think we had about maybe 20,000 people watching our 6 p.m. news. And when I left a year ago, we're probably down to 1,200
Oh,
people,
that's
according to
gruesome.
Nielsen. I mean, CNN can't draw a million on average at
Those aren't
night.
survivable
That's
numbers.
no, they're not, and that's why the layoffs and they're continuing, and it's really sad, and it doesn't seem like many of them are rearranging. They're just digging into their old beliefs. But people are finding. Hopefully, people are waking up. Myself, there's other media outlets coming out there,
Anna
independent
Hoffman, friend of the
journalists.
program, she's out here telling the truth.
Yeah, so many of them across the country are doing the same thing, and I think people are catching on.
Dave, someone might see me and you telling the truth and having fun doing it, and they might want to join us. They might be 18, they might be 80. What advice would you give someone who is young in their truth telling journey?
Someone who would want to go into the profession of the
No, who
truth
wants
telling
to do the
journey.
work. They want to dig for truth and tell their neighbors what they found.
Everyone asks me this all the time. Like, I watch everything. I read everything. I'll watch MSNBC, even though it's tough. I'll watch CNN. I'll watch Fox, and then I'll watch them all, and then I'll go back and do my research. I will go watch a congressional hearing. I just interviewed last night for my podcast Cheryl Atkinson.
Yes,
She has a new
yes.
book out, and her advice was go and watch an entire congressional hearing, because all the time you hear a little 10-second clip. Do your research, look at the budget. Michigan has all this data. It's out there, and I know it takes a lot of work, but try not to be intimidated by others and just be a critical thinker, even if it's something you believe. I don't, even whatever Trump or Biden or Harris, if they say something, I'm not going to carte blanche believe it, and just question everything. And that's what I would suggest, and that's what a journalist should be doing.
Dave, I said earlier that you're probably the most followed journalist in Michigan. What is your following looking like across channels these days? And how did it come to be?
And that's that's a whole other issue. I got about close to 1 million. on all of the platforms. TikTok's the biggest at 650,000 people, Facebook 200,000, but there is self-censorship involved. On Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you got to watch what you say. I posted, you retweeted it, I think, a video of UAW members heckling Sean Fain. Now, Twitter X, allowed it. They allowed the video. Within an hour of it being up on Facebook, I got a violation for calling it hate speech. And I muted out the swear words. So I had a choice. Take that video down, leave it up, maybe lose my account. I took it down. So I have a lot of followers on those platforms, but I have a newsletter on Substack, which you do as well, I believe. I'm on Locals, which is a platform. I was started by Dan Bongino, but Locals and like Rumble, these platforms, free speech platforms, X, I am trying to migrate everyone to those platforms because I could wake up one day and my 200,000 on Facebook, I could be gone in the blink of an eye. That UAW, there was nothing wrong with that video whatsoever. And that's why I encourage everyone, content, you, others, anyone out there, try to own your audience. Own your audience. Whether it's collecting emails, whatever it is, try to maintain that, because if you have a huge following, blink of an eye, it's gone.
We'll get you out of here on this one, Dave. Where can people find you? Where are your channels?
Yeah, I would say the best, if I say Google because it still works, but just Dave, Bondy, Dave Bondy, Substack. Just put that into Google and you'll find my newsletter. If you're on any other platform, I encourage you to follow me. But like I said, you're not getting
the real and the raw.
You're not, because I may not be banned at times, but the algorithm will lower your content. And that's what many people don't realize. I have 200,000 followers, but Facebook is in control. They could make it where only 500 people see what I post.
So Twitter's probably the better option right now.
I would say, yeah, X, Twitter, Dave Bondy, Dave, Bondy. And I know it's under attack now, but I believe in free speech. There's a lot of false information on Twitter. I call it out, but I believe that unless it is illegal, the content should be allowed, because free speech is not pretty something at all at times. And it's not. And it's scary what Facebook's doing. Like that UAW video, I think people needed to know there are UAW members that hate the UAW president.
I just don't see how you ban that unless your goal is to keep away anything that would hurt the Democrat coalition. I don't see what's bannable. It's not like, it was you behind the microphone yelling profanities at this guy. It's a video that's out there published.
Yeah, and I bleeped the profanities even, but...
You bleeped them and they still banned it.
They still took it away.
Dave, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work on your end.